Buzz, babies, and welcome back to another episode of Blake's Buzz. This week, I've lucked out again. To your nerdy enjoyment, I've got, I don't know what book he's not writing at DC, and he's done some of my favorite indies in the past, Ghosted, Birthright. Some of you may have heard of Nailbiter, one of those great horror comics that so many people loved. And now he is coming in to be part of the Energon universe, writing G.I. Joe stuff. That's right, folks. I have Joshua freaking Williamson in the studio. I'm so excited. Josh, I've been such a huge fan of yours for such a long time, man. So cool to see where you're at these days and all the new stuff you got popping off, man. How you doing today, bud?
I'm good, dude. I'm really good. Thank you for that intro. That was awesome.
Hey,
good jolt of energy. I love it. But yeah, I'm good, dude. As we were discussing a moment ago before we started, I'm just slammed. I'm writing a lot, but I'm having fun with it all. That's the thing. It's tough. I'm at this point in my career where it's just hard to say no to stuff because I really love writing comics. Like, it is a thing I've wanted to do since I was in fourth grade. That's all I ever wanted to do was just do this, you know. It's like, and so I finally have this opportunity to really do it, and I can do a lot. I'm gonna do it all. But yeah, I'm good, dude. I'm working, hustling like always.
The jobs you've been getting, I don't know how you could say no to, right? Like, hey, you want to do Batman and Robin? Like, I'm just kind of busy right now, you know. Like, I've got Superman, you know, and it's like you can't say no, and then you can't say no to new G.I. Joe stuff with this new universe, and like you got to do it. You got to go all in.
And that was, it was an opportunity to work with Skybound, who I work with a lot. I have a good relationship with, and I really like that company, and I like the people there. And it's funny. Like, the G.I. Joe job came about in such a weird way because it's like, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was talking to Skybound and we were just like, you start shooting the shit, talking about different ideas and things you want to do. And G.I. Joe came up in that conversation. And I was like, yeah, I have ideas for G.I. Joe. Like, there are things I've always wanted to do, questions I've always wanted to explore, things about it that I liked. And so then when, a few years ago, like, the conversation just kept continuing. And then when it was like, oh, they're going to get the license, the conversation just kept continuing. And then I think at some point, like, they had made the decision I was writing it. I didn't know they made the decision yet, And so then we're talking to Sean Makowitz, who's publisher at Skybound. We were just talking, and it was like, oh, so I am. At one point, I was like, oh, am I just consulting on this? Like, you want me to just, like, tell you my ideas and talk about it? And it was like, oh, no, we actually want you to write it. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, that's... it's really exciting. I definitely was like, just another log on the fire. But at the same time, I was like, all right, let's go. And it's been really exciting and really fun. And that's the thing about Cobra Commander is Cobra Commander came about very organically. Like, originally it was only going to be a Duke book. But we started talking a lot about Cobra Commander. And I was like, man, I really love Cobra Commander. And it felt like we were he was definitely going to be a big piece of the connective tissue in the universe, in the Energon universe. But then I was like, we were just having this call. It was like me, Sean, Robert, and Daniel Warren Johnson. We were doing this call. We were just all talking about Cobra Commander. And then I was like, we really got to tell his story. We got to do more with him. We got to, he can't just be this side player. He's going to be a major piece. And that's when they were like, well, do you want to do a Cobra Commander book? And I was like, at first, I remember that call really well. I was like, I don't know, but nobody else should write that. It should be me. And oh, well, actually, it would make sense to do like a parallel thing where there's 2 minis and this is how it works. And dude, it really worked out. And I love writing both these books. Like, there's an ease to it. I don't know. I'm having really a lot of fun with it, but they're also some of the easier books that I've worked on. They just something about it. It's really easy and it's really fun to do.
I liked the essay that you wrote at the end of Duke, where you talk about like what it's like being you these days, right? And how like childhood you like playing with all these action figures and now like you're not playing with the action figures anymore, but you're playing with the actual properties in a narrative space. You're getting to do all this stuff, right? And then you pivot in the essay to you see your son playing with G.I. Joe toys while you're writing. I was like, man, that's just so cool. It feels very organic. Like Duke.
Yeah.
Here's what I like about the Energon universe. I have always liked Transformers, never been into the Transformer comics. I just never, it's weird. Like, I love giant robots and stuff. And I just never got into the comics. Same with G.I. Joe. As a kid, I loved the toys. I love the cartoon. I love the cartoon movies. I love the cheesy new live action movies, G.I. Joe. But like, I was never really into the comics, and Skybound now has me like full bore salivating at the mouth, like hungry for every new like Void Rivals, Transformers, Duke, this upcoming like after that like little 3-page sneak of Cobra Commander at the end of Duke, like oh my god, like I was begging Shannon, by the way. I was like, any chance we could read Cobra before the interview? She was like, I don't know if it's ready yet. I was like, are you sure? Maybe.
Yeah, they're really
real hard.
It's interesting. Like we've been really protective of Cobra Commander as a book. So I think I'm not sure when those PDFs are going to go out. I think it'll probably be after Duke.
Nice.
Maybe.
It comes out in January, right? They're about a month apart.
Yeah, it's a month out. Yeah, it's January 17th, and we've been really protective of that comic. It's funny, like we just keep showing the same art, and it's like I think that book is really going to surprise people. I always Cobra Commander is one that when I wrote the first issue, I was like, I love this. It's so different than what people are going to expect, and it's like a horror book. It's weird. It's gross. It's it's a different version of Cobra Commander, but it's still very much at heart Cobra Commander. And I remember turning it in to Skybound, and I was like, "There's no way Hasbro is going to say yes to this. Like, they're going to be like, no, this is too much. This is too much." And then they came back with like, "No notes, go." And I was like, "Oh, dude, now it gets game on." And that's one of the things about this that's been really interesting is that like the trust between Hasbro and Skybound has been really great, and the fact that they're letting Skybound, they're letting Skybound really explore and make it unpredictable. Like they recognize that it was time for something different, and that we can't just keep repeating history. And I think the stuff that was happening before, like all this stuff is really good, but we still had to make sure that we did our own thing, and they've been really respectful of that and the communication between the two companies. And yeah, I'm really glad that people are hyped. Like, I think that we're putting so much work into it and so much love into it, and we're having so much fun that it's really been, even in New York Comic Con, we did a couple signings, and just the energy you could feel from people about what we're doing was so good. I mean, I had people come up to me and they were like, I never thought I'd be buying a G.I. Joe comic, but here we are. I was like, dude, yes, this is what it is, though. We want you to just have fun with us and enjoy this like crazy, all these crazy like hyped up books we're doing, but like we're putting a lot of work into them. So I'm glad people are responding to it.
Well, I mean, you've got, I'm not to like scoop you and lift you up too much, but I mean, this whole project has like titans of the industry behind it, like Robert, Daniel, you. I mean, like these are huge names in the industry, like tackling this new universe. At Image Skybound. I don't know anybody who's not excited about it, honestly. Like even people like me who were like, I've just never been into Transformers comics. Like as soon as we saw that DWJ art, and
I know, dude.
It was like, what? Oh my god, and yeah, like everything I've read, Void Rivals, Transformers, and that premiere of Duke, like everything has not let me down and just kept the hype like rolling with like the perfect amount of weight, right? Like it's snowballing down this hill, but I'm not running from it. Like I'm standing at the bottom of the hill, like I'm like, hit me, like trample me. I'm cool with it. Like let it happen.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Daniel's art. So I've known Daniel for a long time.
Okay.
I knew him before. It's funny. I tried to get Daniel on Flash a couple times. I tried to get.
Really?
Yeah, this is like, I'm talking about easily like, God, man, I think I met Daniel in 2015. Maybe even before that. Like I knew him before that, and because I knew him because of Donnie. I knew him because of Ghost Fleet.
Oh, okay.
So when he was doing that book at Dark Horse, so I knew him as far back as then. I was like, this dude's dope. And you can even look at Ghost Fleet, like this dude drives a giant truck in that. It's like, of course he was going to drive Optimus Prime, but he. I remember talking to Sean about it, and Sean was like, "Oh, we're going to get him to do Transformers. Like we're talking to him about doing Transformers." And I was like, "What?" Like, and that was a long time ago, and I was like, "That's insane." When I was moving my offices around, I was going through my notebooks. Every project has its own notebook, but I also have like a notepad that I use for generalized notes and stuff, like that I keep just for meetings. And I keep all those notepads. So I have like, I'm very much like I keep track of everything. So I have all these notepads, and I was going through one of them, and I actually found on one of the pages at the very top, I had written in like big writing. I wrote, "Daniel is in," because I remember talking to Sean, and he was like, "Dude, Daniel's gonna do it." And every time pages have come in, every time I've seen anything, I'm just like, it's so good. And the thing that Daniel is really great at, it's like, a lot of people talk about how awesome his art is and his pages and the energy, but it's like he really brings so much heart to the story, and
Yep.
emotion. Like I always feel like if you ever read like Murder Falcon, it's like a rated R Pixar movie. Like that's how I see it. Like
And
that's
I
the
ugly cry every time I read it.
you.
Like,
Yes, yeah. I was talking to Tom King about this yesterday. We were just talking about books that we like, and we were like recommending books back and forth to each other. And I recommended Murder Falcon to him, and I'm like, "Oh, you got to read Murder Falcon, and then just be ready to cry at the end." Like I was like explaining the whole thing to him, and we were like going back and forth. It was funny, but yeah, like I think the stuff that Skybound is building and how we've been really we put a lot of work into it, and it's been really fun. And like with Duke, I mean, that's the thing that was interesting. It's like once I knew Daniel was involved, it really kept leveling up in my brain because to me, and this is really important to Skybound, is like this is not a tie in the toys, right, or a toy tie-in. It is its own story, and I wanted to make sure there was an emotional arc for Duke and an emotional arc for Cobra Commander, and make sure that every character had a personality and every character had that kind of emotional grounding, and it's an emotional story, not so much toy smashing into each other. Like Daniel easily could have just been like, "Oh, here's a bunch of fight scenes between robots." He could easily have done that, but instead he added so much of that heart to the book, and so we looked at everything else the same way. It was like we got to make sure all these books have that level of heart to it and that level of character to it. I mean, that's the thing about GI Joe is that like every one of those characters that Larry Hama created, the one he went in, he put that history in, and he put in the backstory, he put in so much personality and uniqueness to each character, where each character was so distinct. I wanted to make sure we did the exact same thing in this book, where it's like we make sure everybody feels like they're their own character and they're different from everybody else, right? Like I don't want you to feel like any two characters are the same character, and because that's what they did originally with the original property. And that's one of the things I think the reason why GI Joe was so popular in the 80s was because they were so unique and different, and it all started with character, and that's with this here. So it's like with Duke and all the other characters we're introducing, I just try to make sure I bring in as much character as possible, and then you watch them clash with each other, and that's how you build story out from there. We've just been really focusing on that, and then obviously Tom and Jordy just wrecked it with amazing art, just killed it. Like Tom went for it. So you've read issue 1.
yeah.
So there's a scene in issue 1. I'm not going to completely spoil it for your listeners, but there's a scene in issue 1 where Duke is fighting a bunch of people. In the script, I think it was like 3 people. I think I swear it might say 5, but I know it wasn't like
8.
20.
Yeah,
Like
it's a
there's that
lot.
part where they're like mobbing him, and you're just like, holy crap! But it was awesome because that was part of the scene. Was like, if Duke is the kind of character that never stops, that's how we're building him as a person who like you cannot knock this person down, right? So if he does get stopped, it better be like an army to take this guy down. And I had that in the notes, but I'm pretty sure I said it was like 3 people. And then Tom was like, "Nah, man, here's an army." And it was just like such a cool sequence. And it's like there's all kinds of interesting visual sort of connective pieces that Tom built in it. And there's that 2-page spread at the beginning. We've shown it. It's like out there. We've shown it a couple of times. But it's that 2-page spread of Duke saving the kid. He's shooting the guy. Stuff's blowing up in the background. When I wrote that page, and I had an idea in my head of like, well, here's what I'm kind of looking for, but I understood I was asking a lot. Like I was asking Tom to do a lot, and then he like did a lot, and then he still leveled it up, right? And he just made it where it was like so fluid. It was like one of the coolest images of Duke ever created. And then Jordy comes in and puts like her colors on top of it, and she really adds that other element of story with her colors. And you're like, boom, here's this just dope 2-page spread. And once I saw that, it was like, again, it was like, oh, it's game time. So now I know how I can push them and they're going to push me, and which is always the best kind of relationship you want to have with the artists you work with. But yeah, dude, it's been, I don't know, man. I hope you can tell, like, I'm having a lot of fun. Like,
No,
you really,
you sound like you're into it. And like I said, like you can tell. I've been able to tell this like with you and your writing anyway. Like it's just, your stuff never feels phoned in, and your excitement is like permeable, right? Like you can, as a reader, you can like play witness to it, and it's very like in front of it. You know, it's just like you're not. No one's ever going to read like a Joshua Williamson comic and be like, this guy wanted to write screenplays and he's really phoning this in. You know, like this is like
Oh yeah,
you want
dude,
to
no
be here,
way.
you love being here, and you love telling these kinds of stories. And I knew when the first comic I ever read from you was Ghosted. And like, and that blew my mind, dude. And I was really excited when the compendium came out this
Oh,
year, and like getting more eyes on it, more people, you know, reading it. And then like I remember when Birthright came out, I remember when Nailbiter came out, I remember when you went to DC. I remember, and then I remember like you went to DC, and then all of a sudden it was just like, not only did you go to DC and you're writing Flash, and then all of a sudden it's like you're the man behind the curtain for one of the bigger events in the last few years, and you're getting all these new projects and stuff in there. You're in control of so much over at DC, and then now you're kind of getting that treatment over at Skybound. They're bringing you in to like help push this new Energon universe to new audiences and old fans alike, and it's just it's so cool to see like the industry see your strengths and find good, you know, and like people want to work with you, they want to put you in on these big projects, you know. And it's just like it's just cool, man. Like going back to reading Ghosted the first time and having my mind blown, and then reading your Superman now, right? It's just like it's like fuck, man, like that's so, you know, just like how you've changed as a writer, and how your career has blossomed into all these new opportunities and stuff, man. It's so cool, and it's been you've been a fun writer to watch, and even more fun to read, right? Like, so it, you know, it's very cool to see what you got doing, and yeah, I'm so excited for I'm so
man.
excited for like Superman and more. Like you got me caring about GI Joe, dude. The whole deal of Duke, and like of like I don't want to spoil too much either, but you know, he's been cast out by this country that these are soldier stories we've heard before, right? And how you guys bring that into the GI Joe narrative, and then tie that into why he's this way and these robot, dude, it was masterful. And I'm so stoked to see how the other issues play out. Can't wait for Cobra Commander. Can't wait. I mean, I'm just I don't, you'd have to really like, I don't know what you'd have to do, man, for me not to be excited to see your name on a cover. But you'd have to like kidnap my dog or something. I don't know. It'd be a bit. But if
Oh, wait.
someone was going to kidnap my dog, if it was you, it'd be, I mean, I could live with it.
No, no. I'll just come over. I'll play with the dog a little bit. I'll leave him behind. It'll be fine. Little pet. Don't worry. I won't take the dog. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, man. I always feel like I live in a bubble. I have no idea what happens outside that bubble. I always tell people this, where it's like, and I was saying this before, like, I'm in this office 12 hours a day, but like my priority is just making comic books. Like that's it, you know? And I think for me, my rule is like, I have to like it. Like I have this conversation with other creators of like being mindful of the audience and thinking about who is this for and that stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, you know, I always tell this other writers, I'm like, listen, if you're working on something and it comes out and you don't like it, you fucked up. Like if you wouldn't buy it off the shelf, like if you personally wouldn't go into a comic store and pick up that book, you probably screwed up somewhere. And it's
Yeah.
like, I think about that a lot with the books I'm working on. I mean, a big part of it is I worked at a comic book store all through high school, all through college. So it's very much in my brain of like, I was that guy at the counter being like, oh, you like that comic? You should read this comic. You know, like, oh, you like that? Like I was probably way too much of a know-it-all, but I was always pumped and excited and getting people to like, I love comics, you should love comics too. You know, and I try to transfer that energy into this. And that's part of why even when I'm with each company I work with, and I've talked about this with all of them, they know this about me. I'm never gonna be that creator that just turns in a script and walks away. It isn't me. I'm probably annoying to people sometimes because I'm like, no, I got to be involved. You know, I want to be in those meetings. You know, I want to be in the room. I want to have those conversations. And it's like, even when I came over to DC, you know, it's funny. Like with Ghosted, it's interesting because like Ghosted was really where I started figuring stuff out. Like, you know, I've been at DC for a little bit, like doing little side jobs, little small stuff, and it didn't work out. And so then Skybound, I started doing Ghosted. That was really when I started figuring who I was as a writer. And then you get to Nailbiter and Birthright. Like I always feel like the three of those were like my trifecta of like, okay, now I have a better understanding of what I want to do, what I want to be as a writer. And I was also working on like Captain Midnight at the time. There were other things I was working on, but those three books were always going to be the like, okay, this is me, right? These three. And when I started doing DC stuff, that was a big thing with them was like talking to them about making sure it was still me, but that I needed to be in the room. Like I couldn't just be a writer on the outside that turns scripts in, doesn't know anything, isn't involved in anything. And they responded to that, and they started putting me in the room for different events. And it was like, I worked on nearly every event for about 7 years. Like I was plugged in, or at least in the room for conversations and consulting on almost everything they've done for almost 8 years really. And now I'm taking a step back on event stuff, but that's part of why I was Skybound, where it was like they recognize that I like to do that. That I want to have those meetings, and it's like, we have this conversation about the Energon universe. Like last week on Monday, I went down to Skybound because I'm in Portland, Oregon. So I went down to Skybound in Burbank, and I had lunch with Kirkman, and we were talking about different ideas and different stuff because, and not just for my stuff, but for the universe, because that's how my brain works, dude. I don't see things. I always try to explain to people when I'm working on stuff, I see like a tapestry. I see a universe. I don't see one book. I always see multiple books.
Okay.
Like that's how my brain is, And it's the same way with this, where that's how Cobra Commander started. Like I can see it, and then I can start seeing how do these things all connect and how do they tie together. And then I just try to put my everything into it. Like I really try to put so much of that energy into those books. It's funny. I talk about this with artists, and when I'm writing scripts for the artists, I put like notes to them, but I also try to get them pumped up too, right? Like I try to be like, when a new character shows up or whatever, I always put like, hell yeah, oh man, like look at this. Like I try to like, and it's not even something you will see. Like you won't see that because it's in the panel descriptions, but I try to be like, I don't know, just get that energy directly in and try to inject it with it. And then my hope is that, then if the artist is pumped up, the artist is having a good time drawing, and they're really excited, and they feel like, oh yeah, this is fucking dope. Then that gets to you. I was talking to another writer this morning, and I was talking to him about something else in the Energon universe, and I was explaining that like with a lot of these books, especially with Cobra Commander, I always try to make sure there's always like one what the fuck moment in the book. Like I just try to make sure, because I know how I respond to that stuff. One of the things that I was really excited about with this is I think that sometimes one of the things that we're missing in comics right now are surprises. Like I feel like we all are maybe too plugged in some places, and it's like it's so hard to surprise people right now. And Robert has also always had that in his head. And when we were developing this, I tell this story every time we talk about Energon Universe stuff, but it's true. They told me that Robert had an idea to do a creator-owned book, like to sell a book as a creator-owned book, but in the last page was a Transformer. That idea was a long time ago, but Robert was always like, I always want to do that. I always want to do that. And it got to a point where that idea was so old that, like, and I shouldn't say old, but he came up with it a long time ago. Every time Robert did a creator-owned book after that, I was reading the issue one being like, there's going to be a Transformer in this. Like so Firepower, when he was doing Skybound X, I kept thinking like, oh, there's going to be a Transformer in this somehow, right? Like, and but Robert was like, he understood surprising people and moving quickly with those surprises. And I think with the Energon universe, I think that's part of the hype and part of the energy was that it was like, oh, here's Void Rivals. You think you know what Void Rivals is? Nope, here's a Transformer. Oh, you think you know what this is? Well, here's Daniel Warren Johnson doing Transformers, and you're like, what? Then it's like brains are exploding, and then it's like, oh, you think we're doing J. Joe? Nope, here's Duke and Cobra Commander. It's like, and then you're like, what is happening? And it makes you more engaged because you are asking those questions. I think one of the worst things you can do for the audience sometimes is give them the answers. Like, let them, they're smart people, comic book people. I always joke about those people. I'm like, listen, if you put like a teaser on the internet, they're going to figure that shit out in an hour. They're going to know exactly what it is, right? So you got to keep that in mind. And so I'm like, I think that the fact that Skybound is really making an effort to surprise people, and that's even the thing with Duke and the stuff that we're doing in Duke and the stuff we're doing in Cobra Commander, we're making sure there's that level of energy also of we want you to discover it by reading it and being pumped up about it. And so that, I think that's something that we've been able to build, and it's really exciting to watch. I'm just so happy that people are like being surprised by this stuff and being pumped up. It's like you were saying, like you're surprised you're buying a G.I. Joe comic, like you're pumped. Like that to me is like, that's what we need. We need more of that type of energy right now. And so that's really, really exciting to see people responding to it.
Yeah. I mean, just like from my perspective as like an interviewer, like, when I found out we were going to get to talk, I had to I was like, all right, well, you can't just talk to him for 30 minutes about Damian Wayne, even though I would love that because I love Damian Wayne, right? And
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
you really get him. I figured you had to be a big Damian fan just because of you've done so much solo stuff with him, and now Batman and Robin and all this stuff
Yeah.
through the last couple years. But yeah, you very much like get him, and like the little spry little asshole that like Grant, envisioned, and how he's changed. Anyway, like, but I was like, but I wasn't like upset about that because I was like, actually, I'm stoked to talk about Duke, and that was funny because I was like,
Yeah,
man,
so,
I'm not Gojo, I'm not. That's never really been me. Even
yeah.
the toys as a kid, like I had a jet and some figures, but I was Ninja Turtle Power Rangers, right? Like GI Joe was like
Uh,
I was, that was the tertiary market, right?
yeah, Ninja Turtles is my cap off. That's we're aging ourselves, but it's like that's where I capped off with Ninja Turtles. My little brothers were into Power Rangers, but that's
Nice.
how I always like. It's like, yeah, Ninja Turtles was my end of the '80s like transition out, I guess, of stuff. Like I remember buying Ninja Turtles, being super pumped, going, just going watching the movie, all that. But then after that, I think Ninja Turtles is the end of like even though it was a comic book, but it's like is the end of my 80s toy obsession.
Okay.
And then it was hardcore comic books after that. It was Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, X-Men. And then Image hit, and it was like, what is this? And then you're just like, then it was all hardcore Image stuff after that, So yeah, dude.
Real quick,
Yeah,
just
sure.
where I know like the social media sphere is kind of changing these days, like
Mhm.
newsletter, Substack. Where's the
Yeah.
best place to find you, keep track of all the stuff you got going
I
on?
mean, I'm still using Twitter and Instagram right now, or X and Instagram right now. But the newsletter, I think next year we're gonna really ramp it up. Like I want to relaunch it. Right now, we're just kind of using it as like this came out this week
Mhm.
sort of thing. But yeah, next year newsletter will be a bigger priority, probably starting in January. Like that's something we really want to beef up as much more. My assistant and I have been talking about a lot of trying to beef up the newsletter. So if people
Nice.
really want to know what's going on, yeah, join that newsletter.
Yeah, definitely. I can't like get signed up, follow him, keep track of what he's going on. Tell your shops you want Cobra Commander and Duke. Go all in on the Energon universe. Actually, if you guys aren't reading this, you're missing out. It's really great. It's just great comic booking, even if you're not super familiar with the properties that they're bringing back to the forefront. And yeah, like Superman, Batman, Robin, the recent Rogues,
Yeah, everyone always
Green
thinks
Arrow. Sorry, yeah, Green Arrow.
my boy Ollie, the Forgotten Son. Yeah.
But like all these great titles you got going, both indie and over at DC. Everybody needs to pre-order your books. Keep track of you, Joshua. This is a big honor for me. I've been a huge fan of you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on my channel and talk about your awesome books, man. You're a phenomenal writer, and I'm just always excited to see what you got coming up, what you got hiding up your sleeve.
All right, on man. Hey, thank you. I really like no joke. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. Like I live in a bubble. I have no idea what's going on. So I'm like, oh, somebody likes me. This is great. This is awesome. But yeah, thank you so much, dude. It was really great talking to you, and I hope your listeners, keep listening to you as well. And I hope that they check out the books.